And then, I know we've talked about kind of getting experts involved in this. How would that play in?
Yeah, so more so than any other amusement park case that we handle, you definitely need an expert, because a lot of these things, one, you have to have somebody testifies to this staffing issue, the design of the park. Sometimes these are laid out really tight, so they're really cramming kids in real tight, and that's an issue when you have a lot of people bouncing. So obviously, we need an expert opinion that'll be able to allow us to prove your case if we have to try the case.
Right. Okay, well, let's move on to go-karts, because it's kind of, we were chatting about that a little bit with staffing issues, could be the same kind of thing. What about like the harnessing and that being an improper harness?
Yeah, so again, sometimes we have little kids. They're not, if you have a staffing issue, they're not watching these kids. Everybody wants to think they're taller and sit up high, to ride the big go-karts. And if you're not trained and the staff's not trained, they're going to let these little kids go, and they probably cannot control that. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if they're not big enough to ride it, they're not big enough to be supported by the harness, even if they think it looks like it's latched. Yeah. So we've had cases where this has happened and little kids are zipping around the thing. Of course, what happens? They lose control, or somebody bumps them off, and they're not strong enough to hold the wheel, or can't even reach the brake anyway. And head injuries can happen.
Reaching the pedals is a lot, because we've had accidents, just like go-kart accidents, like car accidents, where it's a kid that's too small. They can't stop in time because they can't reach those pedals.
Yeah.
So what is the injury? Does the go-kart like flip, or they just get like a whiplash kind of thing?
It's severe whiplash. They could hit their head on the little steering wheel. Whiplash. It could even be a brain injury, a closed head injury.
Wow.
We've had a couple cases where they get their teeth knocked out. Mm-hmm. So it happens, and everybody just needs to be aware of it, and just watch your kids like a hawk, and just be prepared when you're out and about.
Right. All right. And then water parks. That's kind of a whole different ball game. With lifeguard supervision. I mean, more so than even the others. I feel like water parks, those staff really need to be trained well.
Absolutely. And same issue with staffing. But you need lifeguards, right? Because now we're messing with water. We're adding water into the mix. Right. Little kids and huge people. You can easily lose track of your child when they're running around all these different slides. So the worst cases that we could see, obviously, is a drowning case. We never want to see that. And that is specifically because they're not staffed, or there's too many people there. They're not keeping the correct ratios. Too many people relative to the staff they have on site.
Well, and we all know how crazy busy it gets in the summer. Especially, I used to lifeguard at water parks locally, and it's very scary. It's very scary because it's very easy to miss somebody like underneath somebody else. So there's so many people. So
yeah, because you'll miss them, or there's just so many. You get like hypnotized almost. You just let them go down. You let them go down. You let them go down, and when you're sitting in the hot sun as a lifeguard, you're a teenage lifeguard or a young college kid lifeguard. Mm-hmm. I mean, that wears on you, right? So if you're 4 hours into your shift, that's when you're getting drowsy. You're just getting distracted, and then something bad can happen.
If somebody gets hurt, is that like a claim against the lifeguard, or is that a claim against the company?
Yeah, it'll be against the company. The good news is all these amusement providers in South Carolina by law have to have insurance. Okay, they have to have at least $500,000, and many of them have multiple millions of insurance.
Gotcha.
So there's insurance coverage there.
Yeah.
So that's the one good news. Unlike a car wreck where we could get stuck with a minimum policy, we're dealing with big policies.
Gotcha. Well, and then of course when you add in water too, I'm sure there's a ton of slip and fall cases for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't really see too much of those. Those are kind of a little harder to prove, but we would see the drowning cases. We've had cases before where similar to the go-karts, they're letting smaller kids on bigger rides, and they're getting knocked around in the tube, and then they're getting broken wrists. We've seen head injuries, bruising, and then we've also seen there's some of these rides around here where you have to grab a mat. You take a mat up, and everybody sits on the mat, and then you take off on the mat, and they're not watching where they're putting the mats back, because everybody's having fun. They get done with the ride, they throw their mat over here, they throw their mat over here, and then the employee, instead of properly putting, maybe this slide mat needs to go with this ride, they mix it up, and then when some little kid takes it, it's the wrong mat for the wrong slide. It's a faulty design that way. Injury results.
So when we talk about amusement parks, you've said that they have some protection in the law. So each ride has to be inspected. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so all these rides have to be inspected, and that's to kind of protect the public. Obviously, we don't want like a carnival to come into town who's fly by night with no inspections, and they have elephant rides and all that kind of those fly by night circus.
Those
deals.
Things get inspected?
Well, they don't get inspected.
Oh, they don't. I was going to say.
Yeah, that's why we need to make sure they're inspected, right? So this is what it's meant to prohibit.
Okay.
So So they have to get everything inspected. So, if we take a case in, we're going to make sure that we get those inspections, and we'll send a FOIA request to get that. And then also, the law protects them. It's a huge industry here on the coast, obviously. So the laws are there to protect them. But, that's just defenses that could be used, but we can usually still overcome that. There's always some kind of carve out for negligence that we use to be able to bring a claim and get to that insurance policy for the client.
Yeah, and the good part is, you guys get in there and do the dirty work. You investigate everything to make sure that they are getting the maximum amount that they can.
Yeah, that's our goal from day one.
Yeah.
There's a big, we got our investigator to go out there, make sure they're in the law also. It gives them defenses, but also make sure they have certain signage requirements, so that it's broken out there. Because what we're trying to get to is any kind of negligence per se cause of action that will really nail down the negligence, and we're just arguing over damages. So we look into everything and see, what stone needs to be overturned, what T to cross, what I to dot.
Yeah.
To ultimately work the case out.
Well, I think the big takeaways for me is of course, be careful, right? We don't want anybody getting injured, but if something does happen, of course, see a lawyer. And also those waivers that you sign, they don't hold you hostage. You can get around those, but of course you want to have a consultation, and those are free, right?
Absolutely free. We'll sit down and talk to you. We do it every day. Just reach out, talk to Sarah, talk to myself, anybody on my intake team. We're always here for you.
Awesome. Thank you both for chatting about this. Some good information there. Of course, you can visit us online, justiceslovely.com. Give us a call if you have any questions. And of course, you can find us on all of your social media channels, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're everywhere that you consume your media. So thank you so much for watching the Carolina Justice Report today. We'll see you next time.
When life gets ugly, justice is lovely.